Hello everyone, this is Ron from mini-itx Legion. This is part of our review of the Cooler Master N200 mini tower case. And this is the part where we do our component installation. But unlike our typical component installation tutorial videos, this will more or less not be linear. And I'm curious in how well the N200 supports some high-end components. So I'm gonna go before going to installing my motherboard and all the rest of the components. I want to make sure how it will fit the radiators first and the fans. So what I'm going to do is, since the hard drive cage here is removable, I'm going to remove that temporarily. I'm going to move that out. You can see there are screws at the bottom, so I'm going to unscrew that. And there is a mounting hole here on the side that you can move it back. I didn't see it in the beginning, but you actually have to remove two more screws here on the connecting the hard drive cage onto the motherboard tray itself, after removing the screws here at the bottom to completely remove and move the hard drive cage here. So there is a bit of clearance issue when installing a 248mm radiator in the front, so let me just demonstrate what that looks like. See there that it is touching that part, the top, but thankfully Cooler Master is in advance, of course, and including their design, the ability to remove the 3.5-inch external air here. Let me just move the camera, pan up. So I can remove this just by removing the screws here in the front. I can remove that and give a little bit more clearance in there so I can maneuver my radiator. Of course, what you lose here, you lose. And then after that, of course, screw that and then you slide it out. What you lose is a 3.5-inch drive bay, and the additional 3.5-inch drive bay, and you also lose a 2.5-inch or SSD mounting here underneath that. But considering there's 3 more airs to mount a 2.5-inch drive and there's 2 more airs to mount a 3.5-inch drive, it's not much of a loss. So that is actually a very good compromise, considering. And let's see there now if I can maneuver my radiator. Not any issues now. As you can see, perfectly fits. Alright, here I have my radiator installed with push-pull fan. So here's the moment of truth to test out whether I can put in the front bezel here. Let me just make sure that all my cables are out of the way. I can actually pull it out. Let me just show you what it looks like there with the cables. I actually managed to just move the camera here, pan down. See, there is room for cables here, so just tug them out, make sure they're out of the way and they don't block the cover. Let me just put in the cover here, and let's see, the seal is perfect, and it definitely can close. See there, perfect close to the radiator. And here at the front, this is a 27mm thick radiator. You can definitely go for a thicker radiator if you're just going to go for a push for the intake. And let me find my ruler here. It was just here a minute ago, but you can definitely go for push-pull with 27mm radiator. And let's see how much space is clear here if you decide to keep the hard drive cage, since it actually a bit more clearance there, but it is folded here, so it lessens it by about, do it in millimeters, actually 1 centimeter. So there's a 1 centimeter clearance here in between the fan and the hard drive cage, and you can definitely go for a thicker radiator, 27mm plus 25mm plus 1 centimeter of clearance here, so 10mm of clearance all the way until it touches that part. So definitely a very spacious room for radiator in the front. And let me just pan up here to what it looks like. Also, I have my, see if for self-contained units such as this one, let's see if it reaches the middle. Of course, I won't until I actually install it, but it looks like it can, even if it's on the farther end there. And definitely will go if you put it in the bottom or in here. Alright, here I have everything restored back to its original position here. We've seen what it looks like with a 240mm radiator in front. I'm actually just going to test it with the air cooler, so that's the original configuration here. I can't remove the fan there, so you won't know what the stock cooling is like. So what I'm going to do now is install it one by one, Starting with the motherboard. Unfortunately, I don't have a micro-ATX motherboard, but I do have a mini-ITX motherboard here. It does support mini-ITX, so that's not a problem. First thing to do is, of course, install the standoffs needed. And I only need 4, essentially. The mini-ITX board essentially just goes up to here. So I only need to put 2 more standoffs here. And I'm going to do that with, of course, the adapter included. Check your accessory pack here. Take 2 of the brass standoffs and this adapter. Allows us to install it without using long enough pliers. We just need to essentially, let me just put these screws here. Put the standoff inside there and take your screwdriver here and just basically screw it in place into the mounting hole there. It's much more convenient, and pretty much every case manufacturer should provide these cases. It's a lot easier installing. Of course, if you're going to install a micro-ATX case, you need to fill out the other holes here for the mounting. For mounting the full micro-ATX size case. Right, here I have my motherboard installed. This is a mini-ITX motherboard. Again, you can install a micro-ATX motherboard if you like. In fact, it is much better for that because you can manage the cable much easily. The layout of the mini-ITX, as you can see, is different compared to standard ATX and micro-ATX size, in that it has the connection to the top. It has the SATA cables at the top as well. Front pack connectors on the top as well. So most of the time I would have to do some different cable management. In this case, although it can fit a mini-ITX case, it is not exactly more accommodating to mini-ITX cable management. It is more for micro-ATX because there are room here for on the front and here at the bottom for routing all your cables. And although there isn't a routing area at the top, there is very little space there. You can put a 120mm fan here because it is offset. But a 140 will be very tight. It will be touching your motherboard. Will basically about a millimeter clearance. But if you're going to install a micro-ATX case, mini-ITX motherboard such as this one, I advise not putting any fan at the top here because it's very well, you can, but I would advise a 120mm fan because a 140mm fan will be might have some kind of issue with the 24-pin cable there, unless you drag that cable lower enough so it doesn't block that. And what I'm going to do now is put in my processor, and I'm going to show you I'm going to show you the clearance for the CPU cooler, whether it can fit something taller than 160mm. And if you want to install the motherboard, of course, you use the M3x5 screws that you see here. I have extras here. I only needed to use 4 for the mini-ITX, so there's plenty more left here for the rest of the stuff. That's also the same screw you will use to install the buckle lock. You just basically slide that in here on the side, and then I'll just show you that quickly. You see that? Oops. This is very useful in LAN parties. If you're gonna take your system out in public, you can see that it's hanging out there, and you just basically take the M3x5 screw and screw it in place there. It locks it. Actually, let me see if it can fit that. I'm actually doing it backwards. There you go. Oops. Let me just don't confuse the 2 holes here. One is actually the bigger hole is for the loop that you need to use. Smaller hole is for the security. So let me try that again. I put that in, and it's quite small, so you have to be nimble. There you go. And you can see that. And just take your screw, put it in the hole, and then lock it in place. Just pan the camera here so you can have a better look here without me holding the case up top. There you go. See that? And now you have a security lock for your case. This is of course optional. But for those who are concerned when they're taking the system out in public, is a very useful and very simple tool. The power supply mounting area is at the bottom. There is ventilation there. There are rubber mounts that hold it in place, so you just take your power supply with the fan and face it downwards. You can mount it upwards, but it will draw air from the hot components inside, so it is actually better if it has its own chamber, so it's drawing cool air from the bottom. There's definitely enough clearance for that. And that's much healthier for a power supply. Of course, lock it in the back, And this is 170 millimeter long power supply, and there's more clearance there because the total from the end to the hard drive cage here is 25 centimeters. So you can install a power supply up to 25 centimeters long. Actually, I would say 24 centimeters because there is a little bit of fold here that encroaches onto the area. If you move it back because you needed room for the radiator in the front, you are down to about 22 centimeters of clearance. So that's still plenty of room for most power supplies. Of course, you need that clearance here, especially if you have a non-modular power supply, to store the extra cables and also route your cables in here. You'll be storing all the extra length in that bottom area right there. We've seen the 240 millimeter radiator mounting at the front. Now it is time to test the 160 millimeter clearance. This is a Fantex DC14PE. These, according to Fantex website, they have it measured to 160 millimeters up to the heatsink itself. With the fan, it measures 171 millimeters tall at most. So I'm going to take the side panel here, make sure I have the right side panel, and I'm going to close it. And there you go. As you can see, it is actually just perfectly touching that that fan there. So it's definitely 171 millimeters of clearance. The embossed side panel gives a little bit more room, so you can actually fit that higher clearance with the fan. 160 millimeters if it was just flush without the side panel, but it gives you additional room to fit the total 171 millimeters of height for the CPU cooler, which is again very good. I'm impressed that the Cooler Master has enough clearance for a large CPU cooler such as this in a small case. Although I'm surprised that they're being modest about it, because this is, I believe, a second or third Cooler Master case I've tested it where they understated it can fit 160 millimeters when in fact it can fit 161 millimeters. Obviously, if you're going to put a side panel fan on that side panel, you are going to minimize the clearance by at least 25 millimeters. So keep that in mind when you want to install a large CPU cooler and you want a fan on that side panel. And I'm going to, of course, when you're working on a very small case like this one, let me just move the camera here so you can see what it looks like inside. There won't be much room to maneuver here at the back, especially for a mini-ITX build like this one. I would suggest plugging in all your cables first, especially the SATA cables and stuff like that, before you put in your large CPU cooler, because it will be pretty much impossible to plug it in after you put in your large heatsink. And now we can, I'm going to show you what it looks like at the back. This is what it looks like when the back plate installed at the back. Obviously this is a mini-ITX motherboard, so the CPU sits a little bit lower, but as you can see, there's enough clearance to essentially install the back plate there with the motherboard already installed. If you're going to install a micro-ATX case, it will sit a little bit higher and right more closer to the center here of the clearance, so it's definitely not a problem. Right now I have a heatsink removed. I can finally install a video card in there. Obviously, if you have a micro-ATX case, there's plenty of room, 4 PCIe expansion slots for you to play with, and you can even have a dual SLI, dual Crossfire X. And when you're going to install a video card, of course, you have to use a screwdriver to remove the screws for the PCIe slot covers. So let me just move that. They're not thumb screws, but there are actually thumb screws included in the accessory pack, so you can use those. Replace them if you'd like. So essentially creating a toolless PCIe option, as of course your preference. But for the default here, they have regular screws, which are M3x5 screws. And I'm actually surprised that they put reusable PCIe slot covers, which is my preferred choice. Also, it is a high airflow design, so even if you leave it on, it won't affect the performance. And usually what the most case manufacturers do is they provide you with PCIe slot covers which are knockouts. And obviously this one, as you can see, it is an HD6990, so there's no problem fitting that in with room to spare here in the front. This is pretty much the longest video card. The HD7990 also measures the same length. This is close to 13 inches here. Plenty of room, even if manufacturers decide, well, I don't know why they would do that, but even if they decide to create a video card that is actually 14 inches longer, that is an inch longer, 14 inches or 15 inch, you can definitely fit it in. And that's of course without compromising the mounting area here. The hard drive area is still there, and plenty of room. Even if you have the fan there, if you have a radiator, you can still also fit an HD690 in there, because it's just stopping right at the end of that tip. Of course, it's not advisable because the HD690 exhausts here at the front as well as the back, so you'd be having conflicts with the temperature in that case. But other than that, I'm just showing that it is definitely possible. Now I'm going to put in a more modest heatsink here and continue on with our installation. I'm going to show you this very cool SSD mounting option. I made a mistake in my overview mentioning the grommets here. I thought they were for fans, because that's what case manufacturers typically do. They provide these grommets for. These are actually for this area right here for the SSD mounting. I'm going to show you how to do that now. There are 4 mounting areas for SSDs. You can install 2 of them here on the motherboard tray itself, and 1 right above the hard drive cage, and 1 directly underneath the external 3.5 inch area right here on top. Now the mounting for these is 2 different kinds. The 2 in the motherboard tray requires the use of these grommets, as I mentioned, and the M3x8 screws. These are the screws that have the closely there. It is sort of a flat screw with an extended length there, which is not threaded. And you position the grommets so that the wider base is touching the SSD and the smaller base is on top of it. Now that is positioned like that, so that you can, if you notice the screws here, when there's the holes rather, they have a larger hole into a smaller hole. So all you do is position your SSDs like so, and then push down, and then it is held in place there. It's preferred to position it like this, with the connector facing the cable management area, so it's easier to manage. Obviously on the other side it's pretty much flat and there is no room for your cables there, so make sure that your connectors are facing this area right here. Now also you want to secure it further. You want to take your screwdriver and secure it at the back so that it is held in place completely. And also the second part here at the top, this is very simple. It's essentially a 2-part solution here. Let me just make sure my SSD isn't falling apart here. I have my defective SSD here. I'm just going to use as an example, and basically just position it like so, and then make sure it fits right there. Just snap it down. I have the connector facing this way, and you can also have the connector facing the other way, although this is more preferred because it's flushed with the cable there, and you can use a 90-degree angle connector if you do it this way. On the other end, there is about 1.5 millimeters of clearance that you have to clear there, so you have to use a straight angled connector on the other side. Also, it will encroach on your fan here if you put a fan or a radiator, so it's just preferred to have the connector facing this way. And also, once that is done, take a screwdriver and hold it in place. And it's the same pretty much here at the top part. Let me just pan up here so you can see at the top part here. It's the same kind of mounting, but it is upside down. To install 3.5-inch drives, all you need to do is slide it inside the hard drive gauge at the bottom. You can do it both ways. You can have it facing the connector on this left side panel or on the right side panel. If you're putting it to the connector to the other side, of course, be wary of the space there for the connector. So you want to also align the mounting holes here. There you have it. The 2 mounting holes in the rear, out of the 3 mounting holes on a typical hard drive, are connected in there. And then if you want it facing the other way, with the connector facing the left side panel, you want to make sure that you push it in, not too far. But with the it's also possible, but you have the connector, you can only have the 1 hole there aligned. The other middle connector is right there on this big hole here, where the toolless, typical toolless lock will go to, but that's the OEM design. The Cooler Master N200 does not use that, but you can still put in your screw in there if you'd like. I mean, one lock is good enough, but preferably, as the manual states, you put it in facing the position of the right side panel. Installing optical drive is very simple. Just take out the front bezel, as I showed in the overview. by pinching the sides here and remove. There's only one 5 1/4 inch drive bay for external drive, so that's not an issue. Just slide it in, and then take one of the thumb drives. Provide you with plenty of that in accessories, and it is ideal for installing the optical drive here. And you can also, since you're using thumb screws, you can also install half length items here, such as fan controllers, so that won't be an issue. Obviously, you can't have a very long optical drive here because it will block the motherboard. So you want it to be to have a little bit more clearance here. Might need to extrude it a bit like that, but there is a bit of an area you can push and flush there if your optical drive is a bit longer. Of course, it won't look as smooth, but the fact that it is extruded in this area kind of makes it work a little bit, and it's actually in some way it makes the design work.
Alright, this is what it looks like now. I was deliberating whether I should put a radiator in there or a
tall CPU cooler, but unfortunately, as I mentioned, I'm using a mini-ITX case, which doesn't really afford plenty of options for a CPU cooler type that I can use that will also let me fit my HG6990 there. So as you can see, I've put the radiator in the front again, and I moved the stock fan there and moved it to the top. And I've managed the cables as best I can. Obviously, it's not the same as with a micro-ATX case, because the holes are on the side. There are no holes at the top, and as you can see there, that the fan installed at the top is actually pushing onto the 24-pin cable here, because it sits at the very edge of the motherboard, the connectors for the SATA and the 24-pin as well. But other than that, it's perfectly manageable, and it's actually that will work well. And I have the 6990 in there. There's no obstruction at all. I have the SSD drive attached to the wall there, and I have the 3.5-inch drive at the bottom. Now, obviously, if you're using a non-modular cable, it will be a lot harder compared to using a modular power supply such as this one. And it actually has manageable thin cables there, and it's messy there. And I tried the best I can to throw everything at the back of the case. And I mentioned in the overview that the 24-pin cable will be impossible to route at the back. This case I proved myself wrong, so I'm going to show you the back now and see what it looks like there, and show you that definitely it is possible to route the 24-pin at the back, the standard 24-pin cable that is thick. And I'm going to close the side panel now, and I'm going to show you the back of the right side panel. Alright, this is what it looks like here behind the right side panel. I have managed to put in the 24-pin cable in there, and I tied it down really tight so that it makes sure that I get the maximum room in there for cable management. I have flat cables here, so they're very easy to manage. And there's actually a room here to route the extra space. I have my Molex connectors here, and I have a couple there for the fans and the radiator, so I've actually tucked it in there. There's a room there, although unfortunately, as you can see, this fold right here pretty much minimizes the free space there between the right side panel and the cables. But there is a little bit of gap here, so if you can route your cables long enough, you can pass it through here. That gives you about 2 millimeters more clearance, but of course that's very minimal. And there's space here at the bottom as well to store your extra cables. If you have non-modular power supply, you probably want to store it here at the front and some more here at the back. Now, unfortunately, as you can see, there is no hole at all here for the 8-pin EPS 12-volt connector, so I had to route it at the front underneath the video card. But other than that, it's pretty much a layout. There's plenty of loops that you can use, and there's plenty of tie downs as well that you can use. And there's no reason why you can't manage it with a micro-ATX case, which is much easier to have the cables organized compared to something like this, which is the mini-ITX motherboard that I use here. Well, anyway, I'm going to demonstrate now that I can definitely close the side panel. And let me just that. First, it will require a bit of pushing. Make sure that there you go. Definitely completely closed, and I'm even going to put it sideways and pan the camera for you so you can see. It is definitely closed. You can see it from that angle. See that it's definitely closed there, and on the other side as well, definitely closed.